Let's do it. Wow, wow.
Don't want me clunkily getting over here.
In your own time.
Alrighty, the big C.
All right. Hello and welcome to another amazing episode of Creative Appetite. Today I'm joined by my good friend Mitch, and we're doing something a little bit different today. Mitch, would you like to, I guess, introduce what we're doing today?
Yeah, we're getting to know the host today, so that's what we're doing. We're going to delve into a bit of Jesse's background and just find out a little bit more about yourself. And yeah, just so people want, I guess, like a reference or to understand more about you, to get a better background and feeling of the podcast, they can look at this and listen to this. And I'm interviewing you technically, so that's all right. It's not.
You
It's
should
not
probably
narcissistic.
be on this. You should probably be on this side. Yeah, I will just want to put it out there as a disclaimer. I did not.
This was
decide-
my idea.
Yeah, this was Mitch's idea.
Jesse definitely didn't come to me being like, oh, I want to do it. I was like, I think this would be a good point for people if they want to like know Jesse more and that, because most podcasts I feel like you listen to, you already have an understanding of that person and their background and vice versa and blah, blah, blah. So it'd be very hard if you were starting a podcast and he's like, who is this person? Like, why should I listen to this? And we can go, well, I'll click on this episode and I'll find out more about Jesse. So that's
Find
what
out.
we're going to do.
I'm not vain, I promise.
But yeah, I can clarify it was definitely my idea. I heard other people talking about it, and I think it's a great idea.
I did mention it to someone else. I was like, oh, Mitch and I are going to be doing this. They're like, oh, that's so great. You should definitely do that. I was like, oh, all
Yeah.
right, perfect.
Yeah, I think it's, like it's not vain. Like, I mean, people take photos of themselves all the time and stuff. So
I mean,
yeah.
I take heaps of photos of myself in that big mirror, but you have to. You can't not. It's right there in front of you.
yeah, yeah. This is fine in the standards of everything in the world at the moment. So, but yeah, I just want to know, and this is also good because I've known you for a little bit, but we've always just sort of got together and we've talked a lot of like shop, I guess you'd say, and we've talked nonsense and stuff, but I don't know heaps about your backgrounds, probably vice versa and stuff. So it's good for me because this will be a better understanding for me to gauge you as a person, everything like that.
So basically, after this, you're like, we'll gauge you as oh yeah, he's not a good person.
Yeah, so I might be out after 20 minutes. I might be going, this dude's a dick. I'm going home.
An absolute flog.
Yeah, I'm not supporting this. I don't want to be attacked, but yeah. But yeah. No, but where did you grow up? Because you have a New Zealand background.
Yeah, so I was born in New Zealand.
You were born in New Zealand.
And then I moved to Australia. I migrated to Australia when I was 2.
Yep.
With my family, and we moved out to Orange, out in central west New South Wales.
Yep.
And then I was there for 8 years, and then we moved across to another town called Cowra, which is they're all small country towns.
Yep.
And then I was there for 9 years and did my high schooling and stuff through in Cowra.
Yep.
And did like some creative stuff there, and then from there, then I moved to Wollongong. So I was there for like a year and a half.
Is this with the family still?
No, after that I was like 18.
Okay.
Yeah, that was like at the end of school.
Yep.
I moved up there, and then after that, and then I was like working at Subway as a sandwich artist.
Yeah. Artist, got to throw that in. First artistic role in the world.
Yeah, so
It was with sandwiches.
And the meat was very moist. Yeah, and then I didn't really have I wasn't really going anywhere. Like there was no real direction for me at the time. Like being 18, you're kind of young, so you're still trying to find your feet. And then I joined the Navy, but my dad and like my brother was in the Navy at the time, and then my whole family, I think we're 7 generations military, like 6 generations Navy or something. Like there's heaps of us.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then my dad kind of like pushed me into that direct. Like he's like, oh well, if you're not doing anything, why don't you just join the Navy? And I was like, well, righto. So I joined the Navy, and then was down in Melbourne for like 7 months doing training in 2013, and then after that I moved up to Darwin for 2 years, and I was up there. And then after that, I posted down to Sydney, and I was in Sydney for 3 years. And then after Sydney, I travelled Australia in a van.
Yep.
With my partner at the time.
Yeah, right. So growing up, Sydney's your closest major big city.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because you're near like Millthorpe and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I've been out that way. We used to ride out that way. Because there's lots of because it's so just open there. And there's actually lots of really good skate parks out there and stuff. Like near Dubbo and stuff.
Yeah. I used to play footy against people in Dubbo.
Yeah, it's funny that you're from Cowra and I'm from Nowra. Did it? Because I didn't.
Oh yeah.
When you said that, I was like Cowra, Nowra. Yeah, help. But yeah, right. And then Wollongong's obviously not too far. That's where lots of people migrated from where I was from as well.
Yeah.
So you went from Nowra and then you went to like Wollongong Uni, or pretty much it was like the next. Yeah, it was like a semi-city.
It's like the step before you go to Sydney usually.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you put the feelers out so to see how that goes.
A lot of people from my area they either migrate to Wollongong, Newcastle, or Canberra.
Oh, okay.
They're like the three major places that everyone kind of migrates to.
Yeah.
Not a lot of people move to Sydney because I think a lot of the country people don't like cities, so they kind of want something that's kind of like a country town, but also maybe a bit different.
Yeah.
It's pretty funny because
no one really jumps into Sydney. I don't know anyone that went right into Sydney. Yeah. Sydney's a horrible city as well.
Whoa. Jeez,
in regards to like Australian cities and how it's designed and stuff, I'll confidently say and I know when you're doing my friend who's a town planner, Mike, you met, they look at Sydney as like a case study of like why is this so bad?
What went wrong?
Yeah, exactly. So
it's because it was the first colonized.
Yeah, of course.
City, so
you can't put it over there, now put that there.
You got a bunch of stupid British people running around thinking they know what's going on. And I was like, they were like, oh, we'll probably just make this like London.
Yeah, like this will work, and then put that on top of that, and then they was like, oh yeah, it's pretty hard to get over there now. That didn't really work. But
they're like, oh, we'll be right. We'll just go through the Blue Mountains, and they realise that you can't actually get through the Blue Mountains because it's just like
a lot of hills.
There's a lot of hills. There's just like kilometres and kilometres of bloody like trees. They're like, yeah, we're not going to be able to do that.
Well, so how long were you in Wollongong?
I was in Wollongong for about 1.5 years, I think.
Okay,
or like around that time.
And then that's when you've gone. Because when you're that age, I feel like in regards to the forces, I remember that we had this big thing, it was called like multimedia or something, and they set up just like in our high school hall, like 3 massive screens, like projector screens, and it was like, they would play like new movies that were like cool, but then in between it would be like, it was like Navy, Army influence.
Recruiting.
Yeah, and that's what it was. And I was like, this is gnarly. And so many people, because Albatross is new.
Yeah, that's right.
So many people went there. And I remember, is it Melbourne the only place when you do the Navy?
No, there are other bases. So if you're, for the junior sailors, Melbourne's where you go.
Yep.
Or Frankston, sorry. So it's
like the first step, right?
Yeah, that's where you do your recruit school training and your category training.
Yep.
And then, but if you're a officer, you go to Canberra to Duntroon, I think that's where they go, and that's where they do all their, like, because officers and junior sailors are different. Like, if you're a commissioned officer, you're like the bee's knees. You're basically just dickhead.
Okay.
But yeah, they're like obviously the next step up in the military because they're the ones that are kind of directing and controlling a lot of it. Where junior sailors are more like the grunts, I guess.
Okay.
If that makes sense, like your deckhands and like that's pretty much where the officers are more like navigators and skippers and
more skilled work sort of
not
thing.
Not that they're more skilled, it's just their roles are different. They're like they're not specialty roles, but they're the ones managing the boat, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Just like what you'd see in like normal boating, marine stuff, like a skipper and that. Oh, actually no. On like cruise ships and stuff, it's very similar to the Navy where they got like the captain, then it'll be like the XO, the navigator. Then there'll be like a bunch of junior officers who are like learning how to go into those roles and things like that.
So a similar like hierarchy system.
Yeah, same hierarchy.
Yeah, what I was getting at is like I felt like it was like super hard when you're that age, you're in high school and stuff, and if you've got a family history of like 7, like that's insane. Like to not like every young boy where I grew up was like at some point, and a lot of them did, probably like nearly 40% went and joined some sort of forces. Navy was a big one, and I like highly considered it, and then I was like, I don't want to do that because by that time a couple of my friends had done it, come
Come
back or said like, you know, and then the system of like getting out of it. And in our generation, I guess your grandparents, it's like a very like, you should like just do that.
Yeah.
That's it. Like that's a good thing to do, but don't think about anything else. So
Yeah.
it would be like, if you're just a little bit confused or like just unsure, if you haven't decided in high school, which is ridiculous, what you want to do with the rest of your life, and like that's another very good route to take, sort of thing.
I wasn't necessarily. If someone tells me to do something, I tend to do the opposite.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, I don't want to be told what to do. I have a real trouble with authority, which is kind of funny because I was in a service that is full of authority.
Yeah, exactly.
And I really struggled. I really struggled in the Navy because of that, because I didn't appreciate like the way that you'd be spoken to and the power that comes with holding a rank. Because if you step out of line or you say the wrong thing, you can get in trouble. Like you can get fined or whatever else happens.
Yeah.
And I always really struggled with that, and I got in a fair bit of trouble along the way.
Yeah. It seems odd, right? To be like, this is that it's like in a kitchen when you're like, yeah, chef. Like you call that person chef.
Yeah.
It's like, no, hey, Mick. Like, or
Yeah,
whatever.
that's what it's like.
No.
It's like, yes, sir, no, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, PO, no, PO.
Yeah. It's almost comical from the outside perspective. And it's
Like you're saluting officers and stuff when you're walking down the wharf.
Yeah. Obviously, it's a very good, like, respectable thing to do in hindsight now, like, growing up. It's like, that's good discipline, all that sort of stuff. But when you're that age, that's what it's just like, this is what? Like, what?
I was going through, like, a bit of a weird, I guess, like, when you're that age, you're still young. And if you come, like, I've had an interesting upbringing, I guess, in terms of not much dissimilar to everyone else's have, like, but my parents split up when I was younger. Like, when I was 7, they split up. And then my dad was kind of, like, around, but not really around, and like there's all this stuff going on that I wasn't aware of until I became a bit older.
Yeah.
So then when my dad was like, oh, you should join the Navy, it was kind of like, I don't want to, like, don't fucking tell me what to do kind of thing.
Yeah.
I had like that chip on my shoulder, that kind of attitude. And I think now looking back on it, I feel much more grateful for the fact that I did do it, because I learned a lot. And I learned how to coerce, like with multiple different personalities, learn how to like manage yourself and conduct yourself when you're around like people that are in higher ranks, or they might have a bit more power than you, and then you kind of learn how to, this is going to sound crazy, but you kind of learn how to manipulate a situation to get what you want.
Yeah.
If that makes sense, because you have to, because there's so much power involved in the rank system in the Navy. People obviously, as you could imagine, start power tripping, and they will make your life a living hell. So you kind of have to learn how to navigate that to get the outcome that you need.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. Probably.
Yeah, of course. Like you still do it in everyday terms. I'm sure people like they're just like, I've just got to. You can like confront it, or you can argue, or sometimes you can just be like, I'm just going to say what I need to say. And that's a perfectly good option sometimes. Like, I just need to do this to get around that person's ego or whatever. And and it's a great thing to learn as well. It's like, I don't need to, like, every time this person enters the room, argue and like, here's my opinion. It's like, no, here's my opinion. And it's like, man, like, I'm just wasting time.
Yeah, you learn how to become, like read a situation and be patient and like pick your moments kind of thing.
Yeah. Very wise person told me once too, if you start arguing with an idiot, after a while you got to realize who's the idiot.
Yeah, that's true. That's a smart one.
You know, if you're still standing there like wasting your time, if it's an argument and this person's just so ignorant and stuff and they don't want to hear of it, like what like why are you still there? like you're not getting, you know, like just give up, just cut it loose sort of thing. Hey, be polite. Yeah, cool. No, I don't agree. See you later, sort of thing. That's a very important thing to learn. And I could only imagine like just being on a boat, just being on a boat, and it's that confined situation. I assume it's probably very male dominant. Is that correct?
Not so much anymore.
Okay.
It used to be.
Yeah.
But when I joined, it was kind of, when I joined, I was in the period of where females were starting to get a bit more of a voice, in terms of they realised that they need, like, more females need to be in higher roles. So there was like this massive influx of chicks coming in
Oh, great.
because they were just pushing them in. They were trying to get them in.
Yeah, that probably would have been great for the whole thing, because what I was getting at is, like, if you're just got this, like, constant, like, these, like, you know, heaps of, like, 80% of dudes on a boat at sea, just, like, ego, but it would have been like a boiling pot of just, like,
Yeah.
just issues. How long are you in the Navy for?
I was
And 18 when you joined, sorry?
Yeah, no, I joined when I was 19,
Okay.
I think.
Yep.
19, and I was in for 6 years.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and
I got out in the start of 2019.
yeah, right. How long do you have to be in the Navy before you can?
I had a 4-year contract.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's minimum?
For my job role anyway.
Yeah.
Some are longer.
Were you a seaman?
I was at the start.
Yeah. That's where you start at, right?
Yeah.
It sounds it's
I
like the
thought you
most
were just
immature.
I was
No,
like,
no.
are you going to come with something
No,
else?
no, not at all. Like, that's what it's got. Like,
Yeah. So
that
you
is
start
what
off
it's
as a seaman, then you go to able seaman, then you
Yep.
go to leading hand, petty officer, warrant officer, and that's the whole junior rank. That's as far as you can go as a junior sailor.
called. Okay.
Warrant officer's like you've been in for like 20 years.
Oh,
Like,
wow.
it's a long time, but
Yeah.
they're called junior officers, junior sailors, because that's just the what separates the officers to the junior sailors. So if you get to warrant officer, a lot of the time, most of them, if they want to stay in, they will then transfer over into an officer, and then they'll go to like a lieutenant straight away, rather than going. So when you join as an officer, you're a sub lieutenant. No, sorry, you're a midshipman, sub lieutenant, lieutenant commander, captain, commodore, vice admiral, rear admiral, vice admiral, and then admiral.
Lots of roles.
But those, so pretty much most officers are like those. They all will, most of them, like the majority of them, will only really hang around the commander rank, like, because to get any further than that, you need to have like uni, and you got to. It's not, you can't just excel after that. Like, so you pretty much go. Sub lieutenant is like a junior training rank basically. Lieutenant is like, okay, you've made it past all your training now, and then when you go to lieutenant commander, that's when they're like, okay, well now you're like the next step up, I guess. And then when you get to commander, then people are like, oh, he's a big dog.
Yep.
But anything after that, like captain and stuff like that, then you really got to have uni qualifications to then get to those higher ranks, because then it starts to, when you get into like being admiral and things like that, you're kind of in like political roles then. So you kind of, so if you thought of it like a business, as like a corporate business, so if you're on the table with the CEO and the CO or whatever, those kind of ranks, like the people on that table, they're all like admirals, vice admirals, rear admirals. Although there is no admiral in the Navy at the moment. Okay. There's only a vice admiral.
Yep.
The only way you get to admiral is if you became, I think you had to become like the chief of defence force or something, and then you'd become an admiral.
Yep.
Otherwise, anyway, it's kind of irrelevant information.
But so you're going back to like studying and stuff when you get to these.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And so you're based out of Sydney while you're in the Navy?
I was based in Darwin first.
Oh wow, yeah, sick.
For 2 years.
Yeah, of course, you just said that.
And then I was in Sydney for 3 years.
Yep.
Yeah.
What'd you like better?
Sydney.
You did?
I like Sydney.
Yeah. I haven't been to Darwin, so I can't.
So when I was in Darwin, I was on a patrol boat. Like I was on the small patrol boats doing like illegal fishing and like illegal immigrants and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Illegal immigrants, kind of the wrong terminology, but that's basically what it was.
Yeah.
And then when I went to Sydney, I was on a shore-based posting, so I was doing like sandblasting and like working in like a maintenance shed, basically.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And then I left after that.
Yeah, right. What made you leave? So you're about, what, 23, 24 at the time when you decided to leave? Early, mid-20s, sort of?
I was 25.
25.
How am I now? I'm 29. Fuck, I'm 29. Yeah, so, well, that's 20. What's that? I'm really bad at maths. So 22.
I thought that, I caught myself.
21,
I was like, I don't know how old I am.
20. Yeah, 2019. So that was 4 years ago. So if I'm 29, I was 26.
Yeah. So you're still pretty fresh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, really,
In
yeah.
hindsight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I did reserve days with the Navy after I got out. So you kind of like work part time.
Is that like Army reserves?
Navy reserves.
But it's
But
a
yeah,
similar
same,
thing?
Same thing.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, right. And so so you're in Sydney, you get out of the Navy. I knew you DJ'd for a while
Yeah, I was DJing in Sydney for 3 years.
whilst in the Navy.
Well, pretty much, yeah, whilst in the Navy. So I was like kind of like part time because
Okay.
I was doing pretty well down there.
Yep.
So-
And then you leave in Sydney straight away, or you're in Sydney for a bit still?
Yeah, so we stayed in Sydney for 3 years, and then I built the van, and then we travelled Australia as soon as I left. Like as soon as I discharged, I went straight in the van and travelled Australia.
Yeah. How long did you do Australia for?
12 months, but I think it ended up being like 9 months by the time, because no, it was 12 months. Sorry, yeah, 12 months.
Yeah.
That's how long we did it for. But that was a very interesting time. The old van.
Yeah.
There's a lot that happened.
Side note, what sort of van?
It was a Ford Transit,
Oh, big dog.
big dog van.
Yeah, nice. It wasn't a 4B1 or anything
No,
like that.
I wish.
Them things are gnarly.
The
when you
little
see
Delekas
or
or the Sprinter.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I want one there, except I can't afford that.
Yeah,
It's like
and you
200
see
grand.
people spraying like matte, like army
Yeah.
green, and
Actually,
you're like, that's
Mercedes,
badass.
sponsor the potty
Yeah.
and let me have a van. You're legends.
A podcast van that we can
yeah,
just 4B
that I can
around.
just start going around Australia. Maybe that's what I need to work on. Getting a sponsorship deal with one of them.
Have your face on the side of it and
Yeah.
just pull.
Yeah.
Oh, that'd be amazing. So you're in so have you got sorry to go back, when were you do, because I knew you did NIDA. Is that how you actually pronounce it?
Yeah, it's not a.
NIDA, because that was a big thing for a lot of people when I was doing some like extras stuff, air
Yeah.
quotes, like, and like NIDA was the route, sort of like a lot of people went there and did the initial course, and then you sort of could make decisions from there.
Yeah, I never did the actual uni with NIDA. Like to get in, it's like to get into NIDA as an actual student, there's like 24 spots, and like 160,000 people apply for it every year.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't realize.
So a friend of mine up in Darwin, he did it.
Yeah.
Like, and he actually got in as a student, and so I just did a few short courses. I didn't
Yeah,
do
sweet.
it, and that's how because at the time I was doing acting in school and doing drama and stuff like that, and then externally out of school I was doing like theatre plays and
Yep.
and doing like short films and stuff like that. And then I did those short courses just to like kind of progress, because at the time I was like, oh, I want to do this full time.
Yep.
And then I kind of got a little bit turned off because of how hard it was going to be to actually survive.
Oh, it's insane to do it properly.
Yeah, I was like,
Yeah.
you don't make a lot of money.
No.
And then
Lot of hard work.
you're literally going on a whim that maybe in the off chance you fucking get one. I should stop swearing. You get one chance, like one shot at it. You know what I mean? Like you might do a movie role and then you become big, but the chances of that happening is like second to none, because think about how many actors are out there trying their best.
Yep.
Same as this. There's like 4 million podcasts or something
Yeah, that's
in the world.
insane.
and Creative Appetite's going to be number one.
The big dog one.
Big dog.
Yeah, because acting, whenever I see someone that's what like interests me about you, and I know a couple of people like you've got this like Navy background, but then you've got this like creative outlet. So most people I know don't. It's very 180. I shouldn't say that, but like it's not common. Like, so you got this, but you're into this. Like when you're on that ship and talking to a lot of people, I'm sure that's not the common response.
And that's the thing that I really struggle with just throughout life in general, is that I'm very fluid, I guess, as in multiple different areas. Like I'm always really intrigued about life and just different jobs and trying new things and like doing all this stuff. But the creative side to me is like my main thing, and then all these other jobs are just like just to like spark my interest kind of thing. Like I don't know.
Yep.
And so then I find it very hard to hold conversations in these jobs because people don't really know, because all they know is the job that they do, and they don't all they care about is like camping and fishing and drinking beers, and which is nothing. There's nothing wrong with that, but there's not many other creative people in these job roles that I usually work in.
Yeah.
So then I find it really hard to like have conversations with these people because like that you're just not, you're just two polar opposite people, I guess.
Yeah. I remember I started getting heavy crap when I started to do that extras thing. I always took photos and did stuff, and then that's like a big leap because the first thing that happens is everyone thinks you want to be an actor. Like everyone's like, you want to be a movie star. But the funny thing was, I remember like I did a couple and they were super fun. And for me, it was just to find out more about production. It was like the best way to get in the set. It was so good and it's interesting. Oh, that's like what a gaffer does. That's what like the first assistant does, and like, and you just chat to people. It's a good way, you know. And then like with the extra stuff, like you're there for 8 hours, and some of them you went up for 20 minutes, and then you just sit around and wait.
Yeah.
Like that's what it was, and you just like I would just be watching, chatting to people. Oh, what do you do? Like, why is that there? Like, what's that tape on the ground do, and all that stuff. And that was like my easiest way to get the foot in the door. But then a lot of people were giving me crap essentially for it and being like, oh, that's like, it's like whatever, like, you know. And but then when you would see them people by themselves, it's funny because I think most people in a way probably think this. They're like, oh, is it pretty fun or whatever? And like, yeah, I'd always like to be an actor. You know, like people just like, everyone secretly maybe deep down wants to like, it's something they want to do.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, don't hate on me because like I'm not, and I will clarify, I never wanted to be like, I saw it, I was like, that's extremely hard. You work your ass off and you probably won't make it. Like in hindsight, that's the reality. It's unfortunate, but that's what it is. And I was like, nah, I just saw that straight away, which is why I put myself in that situation. I was like, nah, that's not my route. I could see it, but I just hung around and I did whatever and stuff. But it's funny that in a lot of way, like that random hard nut dude you see at the pub or whatever, you know, that thinks that's like soft or whatever, he'd still be like, yeah, but I wouldn't mind doing that. Like I could do that. Like
I just, it's really sad, I guess, to see that happen because for me, I've always been, like growing up and stuff, I did kind of struggle at times with who I was as a person because I always knew that I just felt a little bit different, I guess, in terms of, because the way I feel like, for me personally, I kind of feel like I'm kind of in the middle because usually if you're a full-on creative, you don't like any of those kind of trade roles, using your hands and like all that kind of stuff. You're just really creative, and like, so most of the people you spend your time with are really, really creative.
Yep.
Or you're on the polar opposite where you're like in these trade roles and you have no interest in like the creative side at all, and you're like going, like camping, fishing, and like all the male, like real blokey bloke kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But then there's like me, who's like really loves the creative shit, like super, super loves it. But then I also like camping and fishing, and I also like, you know, playing sports and like using my hands to like build stuff and like using my brain because I'm just so intrigued about life in general across the board. Like I always just really want to be able to be skillful in multiple different areas, not just like be confined to one thing.
Yeah.
So I always found it really hard, I guess, like having conversations when you in these like, because I couldn't go into the creative field and be like, oi, the other day I put up a house frame. How fun was that? People be like, we don't give a fuck.
Yeah.
Or then you go to the other side and be like, oi, you know, I've got this podcast. And like I've told people in the job I work for now that I have a podcast, and they're like, just take the piss out of me.
Yeah.
Oh, it's really, I was like, well, I was like, I'm so confident with who I am as a person that it doesn't, it's not that it doesn't bother me, but it bugs me that I have to continually address this stupidity like coming out of their mouth. I'm like, do you always have to make a comment about something that I'm obviously passionate about? Like I don't turn around to you and go, you're a fucking numpty because you like going camping and stuff. Oh, what do you mean you like going camping, bro? Like this is stupid. You know what I mean? It's like it gets very, like I'm at the point now where I'm like over it. I'm very tired of like, because I've been doing it my whole life. I'm like, bro, just shut the fuck up. Like just because there's no like, and I don't understand. This is what like is kind of getting a bit off topic, but we as humans, I don't understand as adults how you will not evolve and adapt. Like if you could see that it's actually like if you're not thinking about what you're saying, how are you getting on in life? Like, how are you as an adult, if you have a child, how are you teaching your child that it's okay to just berate people if you don't feel comfortable with what they're doing? Like, I don't know, like, does that make sense? Like, how can you just sit there and be like, oh, that's fucking stupid that you have this podcast. Oh, it's like, why can't you just turn around and go, oh, you got a podcast, man, that's sick. Like, do you really enjoy it? Like, tell me about it.
Yeah.
But instead of like, why can't you just do that instead of doing the other thing and then like making fun of people, because there's just no need for it.
Yeah. I think that's why I took, when I met you at the lab, and that's what I saw. I was like, that's the similar thing, because I remember going to the pub when I was like 18, 19, and sometimes you like, it's when you're like wearing different or whatever, and I just get grilled. It's like, man, I'm just wearing a different shirt. Like, and people, and I'll just be like, it's so funny. I can put on like a shirt that's the majority of people aren't wearing here, and then the majority of the people would just grill you. Like, that's their first thing. Like, not many people would come back, oh, that's cool. What do you do? Blah, blah, blah. And I remember when I met you, because like straight away we just started talking about, I think, OzTag.
Yeah.
And I've been like chatting to, you know, like into creative, and I love it both, but sometimes it's just so real. And then we're talking about like cutout passes and like just like how funny OzTag is, because I've played and I'm like, yeah, this is it. Like, this is, you know what, and other people like what? And it's like, yeah, that's a thing. Like, there's nothing wrong with going and playing football. Because a lot of the time, like, people catch you, or if you say, like, even if you say, like, you're like watching UFC, people think you're like a beefhead.
Yeah.
And like, it's like so funny. Or like football's like another big thing. And I'm like, man, I grew up playing football. Like, I love rugby union. I played like rugby. That was like that was my sport, you know. And so many people can't associate it with me. I was like, good. Like, it's a great game. And I learned so much in like the team sport aspect, and like everything I learned, discipline, training, and I'm like, I want that. I want you to be like surprised to find that out about me. Or I also want to be able to go into a pub. Maybe look, I don't dress odd now, but I want to be able to go and talk to like people about the football. I want to be able to talk to anyone about anything.
Yeah, that's how I feel.
Like discriminate or like knock their opinions. And I did go through a stage where I was like very opinionated, but and that's what I see in you, and that's what I love. Like, and with this whole thing, that's why I think this is I'm like, great. This dude's great for this role, because there's the curiosity. There's almost like in ignorance, and I say that with respect of like, because that's good, because if I listen to a podcast and someone's talking about some scientific thing, I want the person like me to be like, whoa.
Yeah, just like slow down.
What's that about? And just like they're like breaking it down and everything like that. And then next time, talk to a painter, and then next time, and I know this is like primarily creative, but I feel like you could definitely like branch out and speak to anyone, and that's just going to help in general. If you pick a thing and be like, okay, I'm going to chat to creative people because that's what I enjoy, but you could get anyone on here and chat to them. And you could not be like, you could still hold a candle to that. Like, they're not going to like be offended, and you could still hold that conversation, is I guess what I'm trying to say. So then the next big question, this is probably the only set question I had to ask. And I actually asked Sophie, which is my girlfriend, because I was like, and how many, have you met her twice? You've been around mine a couple of times.
Twice, yeah. Lovely lady.
Yes, she's a very lovely lady.
Shout out.
But so, because I want to get this like, okay, you've got like a little like idea about Jesse, and I was like, what would you ask that guy? Or like, if you want to start listening, and she goes, well, why? Like, why him? Why am I like what makes? Why should I listen to you? And I was like, that's a great question. And it wasn't in the as abrupt as how I just relate it, but essentially what qualifies you, because I think that's very important when you hear all these other people. I'm like, well, I don't want to really listen to this dude, or yeah, it's entertaining or this, but you don't really know what you're talking about. But the thing with you is you've got these multiple backgrounds. you've got these different genres, you've got fingers in like your different pliers, so you do understand things, and you can also to somewhat talk to anyone about anything and know a little bit about that subject, which is important. So yeah, but for you, why did you want to start this? And what, as weird as it sounds, what do you think makes it about you that like, no, I've got this, like I can do this? Was it what I've just said sort of thing? Like I feel like I've gained all these things through my life.
I just, because I was like growing up and being like that, like being super intrigued about life in general and like trying new things and like always trying to adapt and evolve and learn and never, like I'm so hungry to learn, so I never stop trying to always do things. Like I'll put myself out there even if I know that it's not long term, at least I'm going to get something out of it anyway.
Yep.
And then with the podcast, when I started it, because I've always been striving to do something creative. Like my whole life, I knew that this is what I would ultimately end up doing. I just never knew what it would look like. So after trying all these other different creative outlets, I was meant to start a podcast in Sydney, but when I started traveling, obviously that kind of went a bit to the wayside. And then when I moved to the coast, it wasn't. I just couldn't find the creative scene. I was like, I don't know where it is, and I don't know who. It didn't seem like there was one, like, especially coming from Sydney, there's no like one central hub where you could find it. And I was like, oh, maybe there isn't one. And so then I was like, oh, well, I'll just start a podcast and I'll just start speaking to creative people. Because when I was younger, I used to watch like Channel V, you know, like the music channel and stuff, and they used to have people come sit on the couch like Rage and stuff, and they'd interview them and stuff like that. And I always loved that. Like I always loved sitting there watching and knowing and learning about these people and like what it was that actually made them tick. But the thing that I didn't like about journalism or interviewing in general is that they were always so vague. There was no real depth to the question. They were just kind of like touching the surface just to like make media, to get content. So when I started this, the intention was always to have as many creative people in general, like not just like creative stereotypically, just anyone in general, to come on and find out who they really are and like have these open, broad conversations where we I don't know, you're talking about OzTag or something, you know what I mean? Like talking about something that you know is going to get them like, they're like, oh, I didn't think I'd be talking about this on the podcast. I thought you were coming, like I was coming on here to talk about my painting or whatever. Yeah. But then you end up talking about something completely different, and you can see in a person when you are having these conversations, and then like their brain starts to calm, and everyone, and their body, you can see they start to relax because then they realize they're not being interviewed. You're just having it's like just chatting. You and I are just having this conversation right now. Yep. And that was the whole thing, because like when I was growing up, I was listening to it and I was like, I want to know more. Like this isn't enough. Like a 10-minute interview is not enough. And then throughout my life and like all the whatever happened, like breakups and all these like things where you start to become a bit more of an adult, and you're like, oh, you know what? I'm just going to back myself and really try. And for some reason, when I started this podcast, it's like all this noise and all this like doubt of not ever finding this creative like medium that I'd hopefully do for the rest of my life. It just went away, and I was like, oh, this must be something pretty special if I don't feel nervous about doing it for a long period of time, if that makes sense.
Yeah. You get onto that route and you're like, this is where I'm meant to be. Yeah, this feels good again. Yeah. You're like in any given stage you're meant to be wherever you are in your life, but sometimes you'll just hit it, right? And you'll go like, I used to work for a magazine, and every time I was just like, this is it, and you get that reassurance and stuff. And I'm sure you got that when you started the podcast, like after finishing that first one. Yeah. I could only imagine being like, oh, this is it now. Like
it was just so exciting, and every time I have people come, like every single guest that comes on, I'm always so excited. And the thing is, the other thing that I like about myself or this podcast is I'm how I am on here is exactly how I am off this. Like I'm no different. I'm no different to anyone else. And I'm not trying to. The reason why I think I do well is because I'm not trying to be anyone that I'm not. Like I'm not trying to claim that I know everything going on in the world, or I'm super super smart and know every fine detail about. Do you know what I mean? Like I'm not trying to be the smarter person in the conversation that I'm having with the other person. I'm just so intrigued, and I just want to know every single detail, and I just want to get it all out as much as I can within the space of this, however long this goes for.
I think the authenticity definitely shows through, and that's another thing I like about like this one in particular. I probably sound very biased and stuff, but I'm just like, I do listen to it, and I should say that I've probably known you for 2 years, maybe.
Yeah, well, I've been here for 2 years, so I'd say it'd be like a year and a half.
Yeah, probably a bit less. Yeah, and like the authenticity, I was like, yeah, this is it. There's like what's getting said is what we were talking about now before this, and the authenticity is probably the slower route, but it's probably more rewarding, and as opposed to like a lot of people could probably like bring out a podcast, and that's what we'll start seeing now, I think, with podcasts. Like I remember about a year ago, I was like, Sophie will say these podcasts are going to start really hammering soon. Like it would be a smart thing, or like you'll see, but I'm like, nah, but now we're going to see like radio shows sort of thing, or those people and the more characters sort of thing, I guess, the people playing roles, which that's in another category if you want to do that, sweet. But I think why podcasts are brilliant, because it's like, hey, it's not a 5-minute interview on the V couch or whatever. It's like, let's delve into this. Let's talk more about this. Let's like branch off this. So you really get that about that person, which is great. Like it's those things you hear. It's like, oh, I heard this about that person, or apparently like celebrities and that. It's like, no, you can like clarify this now, because you get to listen to them for 3 hours tell you that funny story about them. And that's what I just love about it. Because talk shows and stuff, I'm sure you probably loved. Like, did you like talk shows and stuff? I remember I used to watch like Rove Live and stuff like that. Yeah,
growing
exactly.
Up, and I was like, oh yeah, I was like, this is. I remember when I was younger, I was like, I want to do that. I was like, that's what I want to do. I want to be there just chatting. I want to be like the host. I don't care.
It seems like a dream job.
Yeah, I was like, this would be amazing. I just sit there and just chat shit.
Yeah. There's actually a really good movie about it, and a girl wins a lotto, and it was, I feel really bad. She was in Ghostbusters, the girl Ghostbusters. She's a really funny chick. Idea. But she played, I think Will Ferrell produced it, and it was like, the premise of the movie was like this girl that does like nothing, wins the lotto, and then her one thing was like, I want to be a talk show. And she's just like, I want to be like Oprah, like, and she just like funds this thing, and then it just like goes. It's a great movie. I can't absolutely butchered that, as you would say, but like that's for a lot of people. You see that and you're like, that would be such a sick job. You just chat to people.
Yeah,
you just chat to interesting people. I would still, in hindsight, I would love to do this every day. You just get interesting people. You're learning. You're chatting to people.
That's it. It's like
providing entertainment. Like
that's why I guess I started it, because then it saves me going out and constantly finding people, because now I have a spot where they can come to me. So it's kind of a little bit selfish in that regard, that I get to learn for free, because I'm giving someone a platform to talk about who they are as a person, and allowing them to have a voice, and whoever follows them or loves them or whatever, they get to listen to it. But I get the most enjoyment out of it, because I get to sit here like one-to-one and actually have full conversation and like learn all this cool stuff about painting, or people that design apps, or people that build robots, or whatever it is that people do. I'm just like, man, this is sick. Yeah. This is so cool.
Yeah. I think I've sat on maybe like 3 or 4 or something. But every time I'm just sitting there and I'm just like trying to stay silent. I'm like, I want to start I'm like, oh, wow, that's how that works, or that's what happens. And like, it's so interesting to be like, man, I'm jealous. You're right there, getting to ask all these questions sort of thing, because you're just learning, like, and I love learning, like, as I'm sure yourself, but it's definitely it's a fun route, and I'm glad you're doing it. And I remember when I met you, you said that, and like, I was like, I think you actually do this. Like, I remember walking, I was like, no, I think like in 6 months' time. And then sure enough, I think it was nearly like that 6 months' time, I was like, you're like, hey, I started it up and stuff. I was like, hell yeah. I was like, he's going for it. And I just love seeing people do it too. I'm like, this is so sick.
Getting broken up with was the greatest thing.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that'll do it to you.
I was like, that's it. I was like, now is the time, if not ever.
That's why I'm up here.
And to be honest, like, and like getting back to the second part of your question is like, the reason why I think that I'm qualified to be sitting in this role doing this job is because my whole life I've been like, you know what I'm like. We literally would chat for hours and hours and hours, and I've never had a problem holding conversation with someone. So like that to me is the main. I'm like, well, if I can hold conversation with anyone, and I like growing up and like making friends, like I don't find it hard to make friends, or I don't find it hard to be in social settings. I'd like to think I'm a very confident person, I guess, and it's only been recently that I've been fully confident with who I am as a person. I know exactly who I am and what I want to do and what I'm trying to achieve. And I don't know if that's just come with old age because I'm getting older now or whatever. But
heaps older.
Yeah, so old. but I guess that when I was telling people about the podcast when I was going to start and what I was trying to achieve, every single person, not one person was like, "No, that's shit." Yeah, every single person was like, "That is, you 100% should do that," and like just backed me. And I was like, "Oh, this is great. I'm getting support and things like that." And then I had moments to myself where I was sitting there. I'm like, "Why are you really like? Do you think?" Because there's times where you have imposter syndrome. You're like, I don't. Like people must sit there listening to my voice, going, "This guy has no idea what he's talking about," which is fine. But like, yeah, I just think because I have a very, I guess, bubbly personality, and I think I can manage a situation with multiple different personalities. Like I could have someone who's really introverted and get them to really open up, or I could have someone who's super, super like energetic and get them to calm down enough that we can have a proper conversation, if that makes sense. Like I can control I can control a situation, I think, just based off my life experience, like growing up and like being intrigued about different aspects of working and different jobs and different creative mediums and all that jazz and like sport or whatever. And I think just from that it's just molded me to here, right? And now I'm here. I'm like, ta-da! Like, yeah, I don't know I hope that makes sense to people and I don't sound like an absolute dick just talking about myself. Because it's really awkward to like be. This is probably the most vulnerable is when you have to speak about yourself because you don't know how it's going to be perceived.
You just think it's narcissistic. Like in my head, anytime I do anything self-promote, if I put a story on Instagram about, come look at this exhibition I'm a part of, I'm like, you narcissistic dickhead. Like, but it's like, not really. It's like, you're just
trying to promote your own. Like if you're not going to promote it, who will?
Yeah. And to be like, I want to do this, put that out there, this is what I'm doing. And then just tell people there's levels to it. But what you're doing is great. And I think it's really good. And what you said with the area, I think it's evolved out of that thing, which is how most like good inventions start and stuff, right? There was like that, you're like, oh, where's all the like, I just don't know where it is, or this is hard to find and stuff. And now watching people, I remember one of your early goals was like, I want to bring creative people together, and like the first one I went to that happened, and I was like, oh, you know that person and that person, and then like I got a job through that, and then I was just like, man, this is like, and you probably didn't realize it's happening, but it's like, no, this is like happening. That's already like, because you can be like, oh, I seen you on the podcast, or oh, you're on that, I know you through that, and do you know that person? And
yeah, that happened to me last weekend at Spring in the Vale. Yep. So I was chatting to the Betty Taylor girls. Shout out to Betty Taylor, by the way, they're sick. And Sophie, I hope that answered your question. But yeah, when I was there chatting to them, I was like, oh yeah, I run this podcast or whatever. And they're like, oh yeah, who have you had on? I was like, oh, and then one of them was like, oh, did you have like TJ on and like this person? And I was like, yeah. They're like, oh my God, like that's you. I was like, yeah, like, so like you see, like it's obviously starting to like, people are starting to notice that all these people are starting to jump on, and I'm like, but I'm still like none the wiser. Yeah. I'm just like, oh man, like,
and you just never know when you put that out there. Nah. You don't know if some guy in India is listening to this right now. Like that's the cool thing about this stuff. Like, and then when that hits you, you get that feedback in person for the first time. You're just like, your mind just goes, what? Like
I've had it happen twice.
Yep.
Another person came up to me at a bar, and like just out of nowhere, I was just buying a drink, and they were like, "Oh my God, like, are you Jesse, like from the Creative Appetite podcast?" I was like, "Yes." I was like,
that was someone I sent over just to fuck with you.
But like when someone gives you gratitude, you're like, "Oh fuck." No. So what the first thing she said, she's like, are you Jesse? I was like, oh man, here we go. I was like, what have I done?
Back up with a slap in the face.
Start running back memories. Like, oh, what have I done? What have I done? And she's like, creative appetite. I was like, yeah. She's like, oh my God. I was like, but it's crazy because I think the thing that I've really enjoyed about this whole process so far is that I've stayed in my lane.
Yeah.
I haven't deviated. I haven't tried anything different. I've just stayed the only thing I've tried to do this whole entire time is learn how to edit, learn how to be a more fluent like speaker and be better at like obviously hosting and stuff like that. But I've never like strived or like I haven't tried anything crazy. You know what I mean? Like I'm like all I know is that if I keep bringing people on and keep being myself and just keep pushing and keep trying and not give up, then I know that something will eventually happen. I just don't know how long it's going to take, but I'm willing to like sit here and keep, because I'm having so much fun in the process.
Yeah, good. I think you're doing the right amount of like pushing. You need to push it so much. Put it on Instagram. Here's the thing, do one every day or whatever. But I think it's the right amount, which still holds that authenticity, which is what I was getting at. And so it's good to see you being like, I'm going to do this. I'm willing to do this. I don't care how long it takes because it's fun. And I'm not going to like sacrifice being cheesy or like go down that route and be like, oh, I better do this now. And we've had conversations. I know you're out in that boat freaking out, texting me. And I'm like, dude, just calm down. You'll be back soon. And like, we'll chat and you'll completely think different. And that's good because that's how you probably should be thinking as well. And I remember it was funny because you're freaking out one time. You're like, oh, I need to push it more, blah, blah. And then someone sent you a message. Yeah. And you screenshotted it. And you're like, oh my God. And they were like, hey man, I stumbled across this thing. It's really good. And I was like, I couldn't have I was like going to create a fake account to do that if that didn't happen, because I was like, this is what you need. And
it
then
was
like
literally
5
like the
minutes
day
later,
it's not good to have your phone out, but I will read it because shout out to this person. You're very amazing.
Essentially what I was saying, you were getting like, and this isn't a weird, you were bummed because it's hard when you start anything and you don't see it happening. You get, fuck, like I want this to move a bit quicker or blah, blah, blah. And I was like, man, it's like in hindsight, it's great. Like you've done that thing, you've joined people and stuff. And also to clarify, you're out. You essentially do like FIFO work. So you're out on a boat
5 weeks
at a time, just thinking, not doing anything, not being able to do anything.
And I'm a deep thinker too. So like shit just runs rampant.
So I just know when I get a message from you, I'm like, oh, I know what he's
I can see the little.
He's been thinking all day.
See the dots start popping out. Just like he's coming in hot.
And then, like I said, you got that the message from just some random saying.
She was like, hey, I've stumbled across your podcast. I have a small creative business, and I was really getting to a turning point where I thought that I was going to have to go back to working a normal job. But since finding this podcast, it is like, you've given me like so much more like motivation to like stick with my job, and I'm not going to go back to this fucking other job and rah.
I was like a keep going.
Yeah, thing, you're doing really well. And I was like, fuck, man, I'm whoever ever sends me a message, anyone shares my stuff, like I'm so incredibly grateful, because you don't know, like you said, like you're just sitting there just putting stuff out and putting stuff out, and you're like, man, I don't think anyone
is anyone listening?
Hello. Like, and then these people just are so like, because the thing for me, and this is why I'm so grateful for people's time, is that someone has taken time out of their day to send me a message, like me, who they don't know who I am. They've never met me before. It's not like you're sending me a message, but you know what I mean? And to me, time is so valuable and it should be respected. And if someone is taking their time to send you something, then I'm so grateful for that moment that they have obviously thought, oh, you know what? I'd like to send this person a message and say, you're doing really well.
Yeah.
So I've obviously crossed their mind. It's been in their head. They've then gone, all right, I'm now going to act on this and send someone this message. It's like, you can't, in today's day and age where like everything is so fast, you can't get back those moments. So if someone is giving you that time and effort, then you're like, oh, like it almost makes you want to cry.
Yeah, it's a lovely thing to do. And I bet they didn't, and I hope shout out to them, whoever it was, but like they were just like, I need to tell you this, but the impact that it had for you, they probably had no idea. So then they're like, oh, this is, hopefully they hear this and they're like, oh, that's amazing. Like, cool.
Yeah, it was crazy because at the time when like obviously as we were saying, like I was really at the point where I was starting to go, oh, I don't think this is getting any, like I don't think anyone's even listening, or like I don't know. You start doubting yourself because you like when you're out at sea on a boat, you're essentially just working with a bunch of people you don't really get along with, but you put up with them because you have to because of the job. You have no service for most part of the time. And then it's just you sitting there going, oh, I don't even know if anyone likes this podcast. What am I doing? And then you get all these self-doubt things coming in. So that's when I send you a message and you're like, oh, but then it was getting to a point where I was like, oh, maybe I'm out of my like depth here and I'm just not, it's just, I should just stop. And then, you get that message like that and you're like, oh, no, actually, it's all good. Yep. Everything's fine.
I'm good for 2 months.
I'm good for 2 more months. Someone else send me a message, please. 2 months.
Just don't, if you get another one, just don't open it. And then when you feel like that, all right, time to open it.
Actually, that message, I screenshotted it and I read it. I actually read all them. Like I've had a few come, maybe like, no, I feel like I've had like 2 or 3 come through similar like that. And I actually screenshot them. I read them when I'm like feeling a little bit down. I'm like, oh man, like, because the whole point, as I said, when I first started this, if I impacted one person, that would be enough for me. And that's still the same. Like, but the fact that I've now impacted obviously a few more people, I'm like, well, it's doing its job. Like this whole project isn't me. I'm just the pilot, and then everyone else is on the plane. You know what I mean? Like it's not just for me. I get the enjoyment of speaking to people and learning and stuff like that. But it's for everyone. That's the whole point. It's not to be a look at me go, I'm a celebrity. It's just, this is a beautiful project. We can all be a part of it, and you're all being a part of it by listening and supporting. And I'm just the guide. Yeah.
So for someone to say, essentially like, thank you for helping me, keep going, that's great. And they're thinking like, you helped me. I just want to give you, like, let you know that's great. But then for it to have the exact same, if not more of an impact on you is amazing. Like, that's what's so beautiful about it is, like, they're probably just like, oh, I'll do this. Like, maybe, like, it's, but then you get it and then you're like, you just see it. You just have to see words and then you're like, whoa, like, how good is that? Like, so, and yeah, that is beautiful. And you should do that more. When I finish a book, sometimes if I like the book, I'll email. You don't get responses, but I still do it. Like, I'll email that person. Okay, like, I really like your book. That's sort of what I did with you, but that was more of a constructive criticism thing. But like, there's no harm in just, like, if you see something and you appreciate it, and even if they never get it, it doesn't take that much time. In hindsight, you'll probably just get to sit on your phone with that time. So be like, hey, like, I really enjoyed your book, blah, 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 for this reason. Thank you. And you might just say one thing, I enjoyed it for this. And then that, you never know. Like, that person might see that. They might see it in 2 years' time and be like, oh, I remember that. And then, like, that's, like, it's something people should maybe try doing more. Like, it's, like I said, it's not that hard. If you see, it's probably more of an art thing. And then, like, if you see someone's, like, project or whatever they have done, and then you just, like, let them know how you felt about that, good or bad, if it's in a constructive way, it's, like, it's a really nice thing to do. And don't get hung up on, like, oh, I need to, like, this is my friend now and we're going to have a conversation and go back and forth or whatever. They might never read it. Who cares? But, like, it's just a nice gesture to do as well. Also, I just remembered Kirsten Wiig. That's the actress's name.
Oh.
I was trying to think of before, the one that was in Ghostbusters in that great movie. All right. So let's go back to the timeline. We're at so you're in Sydney.
Yep.
You're doing a bit of DJing, sort of creative outlet thing. You're doing a bit of, is the acting or that creative thing in that sort of timeline as well? When's that sort of overlapping or happening?
The acting came to an end just as I joined the Navy. That's when that kind of stopped. I did a little bit of it. I tried to do a little bit of it up in Darwin, but I couldn't really find a creative scene up there. I found it really hard.
Yep.
And then when I was in Sydney, I was DJing, but I also started a record label with a friend of mine who runs, like, really successful parties down in Sydney, and he still does. So I was running a record label with him, which got to learn like all about contracts and like learning how to do all that kind of stuff, which was cool.
Yep.
And then then I travelled Australia, and then that's when things kind of started going a bit south.
Yeah.
I
So
guess.
you've got a long-term girlfriend that you're traveling with?
Yeah.
Yep.
But pretty much from the van until I want to say like November last year, I had a pretty rough run. Like for 3 years, I had like a really bad.
Last year?
Yeah.
Yeah, while you're still up here.
Yeah, I wasn't. So essentially what happened was when I was in the van, I was traveling in the van, and I had some really severe anxiety, borderline psychosis for a whole year.
Yep.
Where I was having like really intense thoughts every single day, all day. As soon as from the time I woke up to the time I went to sleep, I was having like really, really intense, like, you're schizophrenic, you're gonna fucking kill yourself, you're this, you're that, you've overdone it. Like, I honestly thought if I told anyone, they would have put me in a mental institution in a fucking puffy room.
Yeah.
Like, it was that bad. And there was like, I couldn't even listen to music. Like, there was certain music I couldn't listen to. Like, it would freak me out, and I couldn't
It just hit too hard, sort of thing.
Yeah, it was just really, really. There's one song by the Ghetto Boys called
yeah, the Ghetto Boys are sick.
My Mind's Playing Tricks on Me.
Yeah.
That song, if anyone knows. Yeah. So that when I used to listen to that song in the van, I just felt that. I was like, yeah, I'm really like, it used to freak me out. So I was having this really tough time, and I got to a point where I was in Cairns. Then at the time, I never told my girlfriend at the time. I didn't tell my girlfriend at the time until like, I didn't tell anyone for the whole year.
So she doesn't know this?
No, she doesn't know what's going on.
No. How long's it been going? Like, how far have you travelled and you're thinking like this, and it's just you and her, and she doesn't know?
Well, we did the whole trip.
Far out. A year.
Yeah.
Wow.
So then this went on for a year, and no one knew, like, not my friends, not my family, like no one. It was just me and good old Jesse up in my brain, having fun. Asshole. Anyway, so we're like, well, I was having these like really full on, like, I've never experienced something like that in my life. It was the most terrifying time in my life. It was freaky. So then I got to a point where we were in Cairns. I was staying at my brother's house, who just had the van parked in his driveway, and I had an anxiety attack right next to my girlfriend. She didn't know.
Yeah.
And I remember I said to myself, I was like, there's two things, like, because at that point, before that anxiety attack, I started thinking about ways that I was like, well, I don't think this is going to end anytime soon. I don't want to be around if I'm constantly going to be dealing with this kind of shit going on up in my head. So I started thinking like suicidally on like how I could just exit and obviously get out.
Yeah.
So then I had this anxiety attack in the van, and I remember I said to myself, I was like, there's two things that are going to happen. You're either going to, you're going to actually just go kill yourself because you're going to, like, there's no more, or you're going to be resilient and you're going to, like, you're just going to stop. Like, you are the master of your mind, and you can control what's going on. Like, it's not in control of you, you're in control of it. So you either really start thinking about how we can move forward, or just fucking kick the bin.
Yeah.
So, and then the next day I remember waking up, and it was like, I don't know what happened. It was just like I woke up and everything was just kind of much quieter. I remember, like, because it was so bad at the time, like, whilst it was happening, I'd literally wake up in the morning and ask myself, I'm like, are we going to be doing this again?
Yeah, right. How did she take it when you had the anxiety attack? What was her reaction?
Well, she didn't know.
Oh,
she was asleep right next to me.
Yeah,
like,
right.
It was like we were just about to go to sleep, and then
Yeah.
she was asleep.
Yeah.
I remember.
So this is all still just private, just you and...
just me and old Jesse.
Yeah.
Upstairs.
Yeah, right.
But and then it wasn't, and then so then that happened, and then what happened, like, and then the relationship was starting to die off as well. So there was like this, we were like, it was like just mates. We were just mates in this van, basically, essentially. And then when I finished the van, I went up to Darwin for 4 months. So we travelled the van in Australia. Then I sailed from India to Indonesia on my uncle's catamaran. And so I was still like, I was having residual effects from all this shit that just happened in the van mentally.
Yeah.
And then because the relationship was on the rocks, when I went away, she flew back home to Adelaide and I flew up to Darwin. So I was doing 4 months up there. So then I was away from my partner, and then she was like, oh, look, it's not really kind of working out for me anymore and all this stuff. So then I'm dealing with like all that just after dealing. So it's like it just didn't. So I had all that stuff going on in the van. She didn't know about it, which is fine. It's not. It wasn't her place to know. And then because she didn't, like, then I dealt with all this more anxiety of going on. Now my partner's going to leave me for 5 years, and I don't know what to do, and I'm away, and I can't speak to her, I can't see her, I'm out at sea, and I'm dealing with all this shit. So then I get back to go back to Adelaide, and then obviously it comes to an end, and then this is how I get up to the sunny coast, because I was like, oh, I got nowhere to go, because she was like, you can't stay here. So I was like, oh, fuck. So I called my uncle, and I was like, oh, do you mind if I come up for a bit, because I don't really have anywhere else to go? And he was like, yeah. He's like, come up, do some housework, and I'll pay you some money, and like just whatever. So then I ended up working for him for a little bit, and then when I was working for him, I went back to Adelaide, and I actually sat down with her, and I was like, hey, when I was in the van, this is what was going on. And he explained the whole situation. And she was just like, what do you mean?
Just none the wiser?
Just none the wiser. And she was like, wait a second. Then she was like, and then I broke up with you and like put you through all that shit as well. And I was like, yeah. She's like, oh my, like she was just like, she was like, what? It was like this, and it wasn't her fault. Like it's not her. She didn't need to. Like I probably could have told someone at the time, but I was so scared that if I said anything, they were literally going to put me into a mental institution. I thought I was going to turn schizophrenic. I was freaking the fuck out.
Yeah.
So then that happened, and then I when I moved up here, someone from my past had moved up who we've been friends for a long time, and then we kind of always had this thing together. So then we started dating, and then that was not good either. Then that was just like a whole nother
bit reboundy sort of.
Yeah, a bit reboundy. Like we kind of needed each other at the time, but then it was just like a lot was going on. So then that was a whole, like, so it just didn't end. Like there was no end to this stress and anxiety for like 3 years.
Yeah.
And that's why when it came to, like, the last relationship came to an end in November, I was so motivated and so driven for self-growth and self-progression that I started going to like these events, and I was trying to like better myself, and I was trying to understand my emotions more, and then I started the podcast, and then I was like, and then it just seemed like it's like, and the weird thing was, like, the whole time through the 3 years of all this stuff, I've always been like a big believer in everything happens for a reason. I was like, I know that this sucks right now, but eventually something great's going to happen. You just don't know what it is right now, but if you just keep putting one foot in front of the other, you'll be like, something good will happen. And then that's why I think when I started the podcast, I was like, oh, that's the good thing. So like all those 3 years of just shit is now, this is the culmination of that.
That's that bump in the road.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I know I'm meant to be, and then you do it, and then you go, oh, that's what it is.
Yeah. It's like,
right.
oh, that's why I had to. And what I learnt from all that was that because when I was in the van in the relationship the first time, I was never open. I was really like reserved about my emotions and how I was feeling towards my partner at the time. If there was any like indiscrepancies or something that we should have addressed earlier on, so it didn't build up to something bigger, I never did any of that because I was young and immature and didn't really know how to handle myself. But what I learned from all that was I learned how to be very open and honest and very direct and like confident, and if I ever had a problem with something, I'd just speak about it right then and there instead of holding it in and allowing it to like just bank up. Like the library, like that's one thing, and there's another book, and then eventually it gets too big and then the shelf crashes. You know what I mean? So that's what I learned, and I think that's big. And then when I've looked back on the 3 years of like dealing with such a intense moment, I was like, the reason why I can sit here and do this podcast is because that's how I learned how to communicate going through such a traumatic time. And I feel like that's why I'm, I guess, meant to be doing, like, I can hold conversation much better now, and I'm much more emotionally mature than I used to be. Whereas I couldn't have done that podcast back then because I wouldn't be able to.
It's like the breakthrough moment.
Yeah, I guess.
And I can just say, like, I was one of them people that with the whole mental health thing, like when I grew up, my household was very standard 90s Australian, and until the first time, and I was probably like 24, 25, and I saw an ex-girlfriend of mine who's still a good friend, this isn't to diminish her at all, have a anxiety attack. I was like, what the fuck is this? Like, it was great, like how you described, and then it was like, boom. It was like within a minute. So I feel a bit weird, and then it was just like 100, 0 to 100.
Yeah.
And I was like, what? And I was like, oh, this is real. This is like a thing. Went through the thing. She calmed down and stuff. And then she like spoke me through it. Like, yeah, this is what that was. And I was like, I didn't think that was real. Like, I was like so ignorant.
Yeah.
I was like, I didn't think that was like a thing. Like, I just thought you just like, just whatever. And I was like, oh, wow. And then like probably only a couple times, but one time I remember I felt like that and I got like uncontrollably shaky. And I was like, this is happening to me. And I was like, man, and I was like, this is the thing. And I was like, okay, go with it. And like, I was obviously feeling like rubbish at the time. Similar thing to your story, like get away, broke up, I moved like up here. But like, and it was just like, oh, I need to not like just dismiss this at all. Like this is a real sketchy thing. And then I was just amazed. It was like, we've like had this great day and it was like all this thing. And I think at the time her thing was like it was like too good because it was so good. So that's what threw me. And she was like, yeah, it just felt like, what the hell is this? This is like this wonderful thing. And then she sort of like self-sabotage. And I was like, wow. Like, and I just, like I said, I didn't think that was real. I've just never witnessed it, never really been around people like that. And I saw that and I was like, oh, this is gnarly. Like,
it's a very.
And for you, it's being away, people probably don't get how, if any form of like isolation is like, well, isolation is like torture, right? That's why like they do it. They isolate you. Like it's like the first thing they do.
Into you lose your mind. Like
and it's like the 1 week. The last real experience when it was like forced was when you had to do if you got COVID, then you had to stay at home for a week. Like for me, that was like terrible. I enjoy alone time and being by myself. Like I could be out in nature by myself and that, because it's never been, for me, it's a positive experience. But I guess maybe for you, it's if you've got that like Navy, like you're on a boat now, this is what you're doing, it's work, or the other thing, like you said, you go away. I should clarify what you do now. You go away for like a month at a time.
Yeah.
And that's what you do. So it's like, that's where you are. You're sort of like forced into that role. So for you, it's probably a completely different feeling. For me, of like, oh, I love being by myself and I can hang. You're like, oh, fuck that. Like I need to like do the opposite. Like
it's really, and that's, I guess it's really weird though, because for me, like I'm a very social person, but I also get really bad social anxiety sometimes and I can't talk. I just like fully turn mute. And I remember the first time it happened too. Or like not like one of the times that I actually noticed it happening and I realized what it was. Looking back on it, I was out with an ex-girlfriend at the time. Crazy relationship. Anyway, and we were like out with her family, and I come from a very broken family, and we're not a massive family. Like we're not all getting together, like having big dinners and shit like that. And I was at her family's dinner. And there's like, I don't know, 10, 15 of them. And I was sitting there, I was like, oh man. And I was fully mute. Like I could not physically speak. I was like, I don't know what's going on, but I can't talk. And she was getting angry at me. She's like, what the hell's wrong with you? Like, what are you doing? Like, why are you sitting there? Like, I was like, I don't know. I was like, stop fucking like coming at me, bro. Sorry, I was not swearing. But like, I was like, I can't. I was like, I don't understand what's going on. And now looking back on it, because it happens sometimes if I go out to a pub and I'm with friends and I get too much sensory overload and I get overwhelmed and I'm like, oh, I can't speak. And it took me so long to figure out that it was just like social anxiety and like it's a thing and you can't help it. And I think it was just, I always look back on that one night and I always laugh because I was like, she was so angry at me for not being like, not holding conversation.
You're fine, come on.
Yeah, she's like, why? She's like, why are you like this? Because you're normally not like this. Like, what's going on? Like, why? Like, full on. I was like, bro, just get off my back. I was like, I don't know. I was like, I feel funny, right?
Oh, that's great.
That's why I think, like, I'm so easy to read because, like, if I'm either like this, super like, or I'm just like dead silent. There's no in between.
A good example is probably like, I can't handle crowds, like, and I mean small like if I have to like navigate around someone in a supermarket, Sophie loves it. She thinks it's hilarious. Like because for me, that's not what I'm used to. Like going back to like, oh, like you being on the boat and me never having to do that. So it's, for me, when like I grew up in a small town and when you went to the city, that freaked me out. Like, I'm not used to that. So I'm like, if I get in a crowd and I'm like and I just think like I just can't handle it because I never grew up with it. It was never a thing for me.
I can't go. So this is funny. So my ex-girlfriend, so Alex was my ex-partner, the one in the van, and she's amazing. Like, I love her to bits. I think she's one of the most sweetest people I've ever met in my life. Like, she's beautiful. But she's also a little asshole. So what she would do, she'd be like, because I have social anxiety, I can't go into a pub, and so I can't do menus. Like, if someone's like, Jesse, you need to pick something off the menu, I'll freak out. Can't do it.
On the spot?
Yeah.
Like what we just did.
Yeah. That's why I just picked the fish and chips as well.
Yeah, I'm just having what you're having.
Yeah.
Well, I freaked out a bit because I was like, why are the menus here? And the guy's like, is that it? Is that it? And I'm like, just calm down. Okay, I'm just looking. I've read the first two things. Is this all you got? Yep, that's it. Oh, far out. And then you're just like, I'm having what is.
So I can't do menus, and I can't go into a pub and find a seat for everyone. So if we were all going in as a collective, I would stand at the back so I don't have to be at the front and have to like visually look around at people and pick a seat. Like, I get really like claustrophobic and I freak out. So what my ex-girlfriend did, Alex, oh man, bastard. So we were going to the pub one time in Sydney, going out, and she knew that I was like this. So she was like, "Oh, Mason, my other mate, like my other best mate." She was like, "Just stand back. Just stand back. Oh, Jesse, go in there and go find a seat." And they're standing at the door of the pub, piercing themselves laughing because I'm like trying to like look around, like freaking out, just going, "Oh my God, I don't know like." And it was like a pretty busy pub, and I'm like, I remember I turned around and looked back, and they're just in tears, like standing, like watching me just like freak out, like couldn't handle it. I was like, this is so not fair. But yeah.
That's great.
Isn't
it funny when you're not feeling yourself? For me, when I moved up here, I was in quit a long-term job, parted ways with my girlfriend at the time, and then just wanted something different. I wanted to move up here before, actually, and then I met her, so I stayed down where I did. And then I moved up here. A very good mate of mine, Ammon, shout out to Ammon, he just said, man, he saw what was happening. He said, just come up and live with me. He he had a place. It was him, his fiance, and another girl. So like, and it was only a 3-bedder as well. So I just went in there and he sort of like took me in, and it was a really nice thing for him to do. And he, but I just so wasn't myself. It was funny because I was like trying to repair myself a bit, but then I'm like, oh, I need to be like this because this is what people like.
Yeah, okay.
And I'm like 30, and I thought I've already learnt this lesson. I've done that before and realised how dumb it was, but I did it again. I caught myself doing it again, and it's funny when you feel bad and you think all those things and you do that, and then when people are around you, they're like, oh, whatever, and you're like, oh no, but I'm like being like cool, like I'm being that person that want to be, and then I remember one day I just dropped it. I was like, fuck this, like I'm just over it. And started being me, started like talking back, just being my, and like Am was like, yeah, this is like Mitch, like, you know, this is, he's like, yeah, and then people like laugh, and I'm like, oh, I'm being like me now. I'm like, just got no repercussions of what I say, which is me. I'm like, this is great. And I was like, and people love it. People love me for who I am. I was like, this is great. And I was like, what the hell was I doing before? And I was like, I remember I felt so silly, but it was just one of those things. I was like, I've done that before. I've done that to like, you always do it to like impress a girl or something like that, or for like money, you know, it's the two big things, you know, and you're like, oh, I'll be this like character. And then you're just like, man, I'm being so disingenuous. Like, I'm just not being authentic.
Yeah, it's really, I've never tried that before. Like, I've never had to try be someone else.
Yeah.
I guess the only thing I could refer it to was maybe when I was growing up, like my older brother's like kind of like my idol because I never really had a lot of father figures around. So to me, I always looked up to him.
You just have the one brother?
Oh no, I got a massive family. So I have an older brother, a younger sister, and they're my like full blood brother and sister.
Yep.
And then I have 3 younger half brothers.
Yep.
But two brothers, and then another one's to my mum.
That older brother's always going to play a massive impact.
Yeah, well, funnily enough, like, so I used to look up to him because to me, he was like, growing up in the 90s and stuff, as you would know, he was like the image of what a man should be. He was tough, like didn't show emotion, like wouldn't fucking take shit from anyone, would fight and like carry on or whatever. And then as you get older, you start to realize that that's not the image of what a man is. Like, a man is someone who can present themselves and, you know, talk about their emotions, but also, like, you don't, as a man, you don't have to be the provider, if that makes sense. You just need to be, like, the support for your partner, just as they're the support for you. Like, it's a weird, I think the dynamic's starting to shift now. But when I was younger, obviously that was the image. And then I remember one time, when I was up in Darwin, because he was in the Navy at the time as well, and he was up there, pulled in for port or something. I was at the pub, and I was like, we were just having this big old chat, and I was like, when I was younger, I used to look up to you. You were like someone that I considered like more of a father figure and like a mentor kind of thing growing up, because I didn't really have anyone else to gravitate to. And I remember he like turned around and he goes, Jesse, he goes, you know what? He's like, he goes, I always thought that about you. He's like, I thought you were the person that I should be like aspiring to be. I was like, what? He's like, right. Yeah, it was so bizarre. He's like, you are so like friendly. He goes, you can make friends with anyone. He goes, you're like, when you go into a room, like people just obviously like light up because like you're got a real big personality or whatever. And I was like, it was like the most, like I never ever thought it would like that would come out of his mouth. Because I'd always held him on this, like I always perceived him to be this person, and I was like, oh my God. So then when he turned around and said it to me, I was like crying, because I was like, I don't, like my whole life, I've always felt like I was under him as a person. I was like, I'm not good enough. Like he's like, which has kind of led into a lot of other issues growing up, I guess, with a lot of other different aspects we can go into another podcast about. But yeah, and I was like, so when he said that, I was like, oh man, this is like, there's not many times in life where you just got no words. You're just like, I don't know what to say.
Yeah.
Because like,
thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Like, because it's like you go your whole life trying to impress someone or trying to do something, and then not knowing full, because this person doesn't really talk about their emotions. So then when they do come full 180 and then say that you're like they want to be more like you because of who you are, you're like,
that's nuts. Yeah, so do you think that you heard that? It's funny how different your life could have been if he told you that at like 18, right? So what age are you when he says you're having this conversation?
So I was like 20, I was either 21, I was in the early 20s, I think I was 21, okay. 20 to 21.
Yeah. So it's just funny to think how different if he at a young age says to you, even 16 or 15, he's like, hey man, like you're like, you know, but at that, it's like, as the older brother, you're almost like, no, I've got to hold on to this for a bit. Like I got to let him do his thing, and then I'll tell him when the time's right. But pardon me, but yeah, it's just funny to think how like you pushed through anyway. You didn't like, you went, no, this is me. This is how I'm going to do it. This is my route. And I respect you as an older brother and stuff like that. And but yeah, it's so nice to hear that, and for him to say, but it's it's great. I've got one older sister. How old's your older brother?
He's 2 years older than I am, so he's 31.
Yeah.
No, 30. Yeah, he'd be like 31. Yeah.
Because my older sister, she left home pretty much straight away after high school, and then it was great. I had it was just me and my parents in the house. Yeah, heaps more room in the house, but
so much room for activities.
But it's funny to the sibling of like, we're like really, it's just us two, so we're really close growing up, sort of thing. But then when you hit that age, right, you obviously like fall out a bit. Like girl in high school, me in high school, like you're both doing different, you just go down different routes, sort of thing, and you don't agree on everything the same.
Yeah, we were my brother and I were polar opposites. So he was a very he was like a troubled child, I guess. Like he ran away from home a lot.
Yeah.
I don't know how much
Did he do, like-
information I should tell about my family life, but I mean,
Did he do like kickboxing or anything?
yeah, he was a boxer.
Really? I just pictured. I was like,
Yeah.
I bet he's like a boxer or
Yeah,
did
yeah,
karate
yeah.
or something. He was that badass dude.
Shout out to my brother, I love
Yeah.
you heaps.
Yeah.
Like when we're still like, he's like, I always call him up for advice, and like
Yeah.
he's obviously like we're still super close, but yeah, he had a, I think because like when my parents split up, and I guess I'll just talk about this because other people might resonate with it, but when my parents split up, the route that he took it and how he handled it was much different to how I handled it.
Yep.
Like he became way more independent and was like, he didn't talk about his emotions or feelings, so he was very very much reserved and held on to a lot of stuff. So I think he acted out a lot more because of that, because maybe he didn't address. But like when you're 7, like I was 7 when my parents split up, you're not sitting there having full on emotional maturity. I'm really struggling with a bit of anxiety, mother, and you know what I mean. Like that's not a thing when you're that age because you don't know what the hell's going on. Like I remember, when my parents split up, we went to a wedding counselor as kids. I was like, what the? I was like, what am I doing here? And then through that, it kind of like made me push out the system because I was like, I don't want to go see a counselor. Like I don't want to tell someone my problems, and I'm like doing that at a young age. So I was like, obviously this is stemming from somewhere else. If I'm already at a young age going, I don't feel comfortable talking about my feelings to someone, then it's because I never saw a psychologist until when I came to the coast.
Yep.
That was the first time I ever saw a psychologist in my whole entire life. And I remember like when I went in there, I remember I walked in there and he was like, he's like, so how you doing? That was all he said. And I just started bawling my eyes. I was like, oh my God, this is wrong. And then I was like, wait a second, like trying to compose myself. I was like, oh my God. But just chatting to someone, and this is why I'm a big advocate now for like talking to a psychologist or like mental health, is like because just having that chat to someone random who doesn't know you and doesn't have any emotional attachment to you, the advice that you will get from that will make you feel so much better. Because so like when you go through a breakup or I don't know, whatever life troubles that you have, if you have friends giving you advice, generally it's coming from an emotional standpoint because they're your friend and they care about you. So the advice that they give you might not necessarily be the advice that you need. Whereas if you get it from someone who doesn't have emotion towards the situation, then usually it's coming from an objective standpoint and it will be much better advice.
Yeah. It's also like they're a professional. Like that's what, if you find a good one, like that's something I'd never, going back to what I said of I had that, which I got from my dad, of that a bit of like, I'm not saying like I'm a hard nut, but that like mentality of just that like, it's like I'm certain most of my friends' dads were like that. Like if you grew up in the 90s. Especially
my mum's
that tough figure.
Partner at the time, like my stepdad at the time, he was like the toughest dude I ever met. Like it got to the point, so when I was growing up, I used to cry a lot and stuff because I didn't know how to handle my emotions. I was a little bit of a wuss, I guess, for lack of a better word.
Dad hated when I cried. He's like, no.
And that same thing, like if I cried, I'd get bullied from my stepdad for crying. Not because he's an asshole. It was just he comes from that kind of world. It's like, bro, don't cry. Like so then I trained myself not to cry, and I never, and like even now if someone's crying in front of me, I'm just like, there's just nothing, like just blank emotion. And I'm like, why are you crying? Yeah.
Because they grew up watching John Wayne and stuff like that.
It's like you can't blame them for the life. Like their parents used to get caned in school, mate. Yeah. Like you try cane a kid these days, holy shit, that's it. School gets shut down.
Not many kids back then were just like, I'm going to talk about my emotions.
I remember this is like way off topic, but my stepdad, because I never, like growing up, I don't think most kids these days know that you used to get caned in school. Yeah. Like I can nearly guarantee that majority of kids these days would have no idea that was a thing. So he was telling me about this guy who was a unit apparently. He's like 6 foot 4 bulletproof. And he was like 16. And this teacher caned his hand, so he punched him in the face and broke his nose. Oh. I was like, that's the kind of male dominance. Yeah. I was like, that's some alpha shit going on.
And that was probably a standard thing.
Yeah. It was like he goes, this teacher thought he was real cool. He's like, come here, mate. And Kane, he goes, I saw it. He goes, and he caned his hand, and this guy was like huge. He's like, no dramas, and he said he just punched him square in the face and broke his nose.
Yeah.
I was like,
and then to come to think of it, then we were probably the smart ass generation because we knew we couldn't get hit.
Yeah, we were.
So in school, I was mucking up like, you can't do nothing.
I was so troubled.
You can't.
I was so troubled in school. Like this, I struggle, man. I remember one time I walked into school and the teacher didn't even let me in the front door. She goes, "Get out." This was at the start of the class. I didn't even get to sit down. She's like, "Go to the principal's office." I was like, "What?"
Yeah.
Like, I did nothing wrong. She's like, "I just don't like." She just did not like me. And then this is another thing. This is, I guess, if you want to know more about me as a person and my personality and how I am. When I was in year 10, the PE teacher sat me down and sat myself and a couple other boys down, and she goes, "I highly recommend that you don't come back to school next year."
I've heard you say this.
So I was like,
what a thing to say,
right, as a teacher.
Yeah.
So I was like, right, lady. I was like, now I'm definitely staying in, because like I said, if someone tells me to do something, generally I'm like, fuck you.
Yeah.
So I had a big FU moment, and I was always going to stay in school anyway because I was the first person to finish year 12 in my house ever.
Yep.
So like it was a big thing. Even though I'm not super smart at school, I really struggled. But it was just the fact of getting to the end and like sticking it out. So the fact that she said that in year 10, I was like, right. And I remember like on the last day as we were all leaving, I just remember walking past her and I just gave her like the biggest smile. I was like, like, yeah, motherfucker. I was just out the door like what's that? Breakfast Club where he's just like
on the oval.
Yeah, it was like that kind of moment. I was like, sucked in.
Just freeze frame of you on the school oval. Oh.
Yeah, anyway, just a bit of a side note.
Yeah, I trailed off then for a bit. Because I was we were talking about like your fathers in this, for the most part of this generation. So yeah, they've got that like hard exterior of like, this is it. And then most of the time when you see your parents, you sort of replicate it, but then you sort of go, oh, but I can change, or sometimes you don't agree with it, so you go down a different route. And so I always thought that, and to this day still, I've never had gone to a therapy session, but I'm actually not that proud of it because I got recommended it once. I was like, nah. Like in my head, I was like, nah, you don't do that. And that was just so ignorant. And like, one thing was like, nah, I'm not doing that. That's dumb. Like, it's a waste of time. I'm not paying. In my head, I was like, it costs heaps of money. Like, I was just like,
that's what I thought.
I was like, I'm not doing it. We got $500.
I didn't realize. That's probably why we're friends. Yeah. I didn't realize you could go get a mental health plan. And it like subsidizes. I was like, bro, they're expensive. Yeah. I was like, I'll just have to deal with this on my own.
Anytime I think of anything medical, I'm like, there's that week's wage sort of thing.
That old school mentality.
And I should clarify that, like, and you can just go at like any time, right? Because it's like,
yeah, I have friends that go see them,
like,
and there's nothing even wrong with them.
Yeah, exactly.
They're like, oh yeah, we just go there and have a chat.
Yeah.
I'm like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
I'm like, so because I'm the same as you in my head. I'm like, well, there ain't nothing wrong with me now, so I'm good to go. Yeah. My psychologist even said to me, he was like, hey, like after like towards the end of the sessions, he was like, all right, I don't think you need to come back now.
Yeah. I
was like, oh okay. I was like, but what happens if I want to come back? He was just like, no, man. He goes, you're good. He goes, if you ever have any dramas, he goes, you know where to find me. Yeah. But he's like, honestly, he goes, I think you're doing. He goes, you're doing well.
Yeah.
And I was like, thanks, man.
Yeah.
Ticket A plus.
Yeah. Well done, Jesse. You passed.
You passed. You're not crazy.
No straight jacket. And you're just like, yes,
yes.
I don't go into that white foamy room or whatever it is.
Oh, it scares the living daylights out. Like if I'm gonna have a nightmare, that's my nightmare.
Yeah. Like for me, it felt weird to be like, I could not. Where do I go? Who do I like? And then you go there, and then you have to almost be, because I want to chat to my friends. I'll talk to my friends, but they're not professionals, or they get to give somewhat of a biased opinion. But to go and chat to a professional just seemed so scary, and it's like never something I had to do. And I was like, man, that was so silly. Like I should have just went and done that. And like you said, in hindsight, it's probably rebated, or it's not that much. And one of my friends was like, Mitch, if you broke your leg, and I was like, here we go, and I know where this is going, and I was like, yeah, and I was like, okay, but they're like, it's the same thing. If your mind's not working properly, like it's like the interior or the exterior of a car, you know, like it's this different thing. It's a thing too. Like you just got to understand that. And in society, it was seen as like weak or whatever if you like couldn't handle something.
Yeah.
But it's like, no, you're not weak if like a car hits you and you break your leg. A fucking car hits you. Like your body's not going to be able to cope with that. So if you get hit with like something traumatic or this like emotional strain, and you've never dealt with it, you're probably not going to know how to deal with it, and you're going to go through something, and that's so normal. And then you go see someone, like you would go see a surgeon or a GP, and they talk you through it, and that's how you resolve it, sort of thing.
Yeah,
so
it's I guess that's the power of podcasts and stuff now, though, as well, is that like you can go listen to like a neuroscience podcast, and they'll tell you all about anxiety and how your brain works. Like there's a really great one actually if you are into that kind of thing, which I am. It's called the Huberman Lab podcast, and he's a neuroscientist, and he does like month. I don't know if he does it anymore, but when he first started, he was doing like month segments on one particular topic. So it might be sleep, anxiety, how to read.
Or for like all of that month.
For the whole month.
Okay, yeah, cool.
So you really got like an in-depth.
Yeah. It wasn't like one podcast.
No, and he's super smart. He's like so smart. And he was just talking about like one particular thing he was chatting about was how you can, like there's certain points in your, like when you can get to these elevated, I guess, heightened senses of consciousness, and that's when your brain really starts to change, and you start to change your behaviors, and you can change who you are as a person, if that makes sense. Like not like you can't change your personality, but you can retrain your brain to.
You can think different things.
Yeah, to change your thought process and stuff like that. So, yeah, I would highly recommend listening to that if you are struggling and you're like me, where you need like the intricate details. And so that's how.
Yeah, because there's a science to it all. It's all. Yeah, of course, yeah.
But moving right along. I feel like I don't know where the hell we've ended up now, but we're.
Yeah, that's all right. Well, I want to know now, moving on, and from now, I guess, with the podcast. So from what I'm seeing from you, I sort of stepped in, I should say, because I saw you do it and I was like, this is great. And then I listened to a couple, and I think I saw some videos, and I sort of just picked out the production side of things. Like I just wanted to give you some feedback with that, and I stepped in.
You said I suck.
I probably did say that.
No, you to be honest, like you are my you're one of my greatest friends, and I always value your opinion. Like
Thank you, I appreciate that.
You give me like really, like, and this is the thing, because I am the way I am. Whereas if someone tells me what to do, I usually get really, like, I'll probably do the polar opposite. Because I'm like, why are you telling me if you're not perfect yourself? Kind of like that kind of weird mentality. But with you, when you give me advice, it's actually constructive criticism. You're like, hey man, love this, but you know, we can, like, have you thought about that, or you thought about that? So that's why I always wanted to get you on board, because I was like, man, you're a great asset to the project. Like there's so many, and this is the other thing, there's so many great people that have been involved in the podcast and are still involved. Like Jaden, who's done all my editing for pretty much 90% of it so far. He doesn't get enough rap, you know, like he's behind the scenes. When I'm out at sea, he was doing he was posting all the videos and putting the podcast up while I couldn't.
I wondered that. I was like, you're not doing that, are you?
No.
Shout out to him.
So
hey, yeah.
Massive shout out to Jaden. If you are in need of a videographer, please contact me, or I can give you his details, because he is super talented and he deserves to be doing that job full time.
I love the behind the scenes dudes. Hey, like you just never, and he's just there just killing it.
I am just, like I said, I'm just the pilot.
Yeah.
I ain't running the show.
Yeah.
Actually, I probably shouldn't even say I'm the pilot. I'm the passenger.
Yeah. You're the co-pilot.
I'm the co-pilot. Like I'm just the face. I'm like the president, mate. I'm just the puppet, and there's way more people coming and like running this.
Oh, that's great. Where was I getting at? I've lost my train of thought now. So we're going into, so where it's going is I started to give you, and when I send a message, I'm not just like, bleh, like I'm like sitting down, or when you write me something, I'm thinking about it. Like I'll look at it and go, oh, how do I want to word this? That's what I think when I message.
When you get 10 messages coming,
yeah,
like, just slow down.
Whoa. And so I sort of saw that and come along, and then I guess I saw your like spirit of like how the just joy, first of all, the enjoyment you have for this, and the eagerness, and there's no like I'm doing this and then I'm also like subsidizing it with working a job. Like I'm not out to like, I just want to be rich and famous sort of thing, as like it's authentic. And I'm like, in my opinion, I'd keep it that way because that's the great thing. Like anyone can do the other thing.
I just don't think that, well, I think with me as my personality, I can't not be this, if that makes sense. Like I'll never be anything more than this. It might, when it does, I'm not gonna say if, but like when it does get to a larger scale and there's more people involved, I'm still gonna be the same. Like I'm never gonna change because I just physically can't do that because I've never been able to do it my whole life, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like I'm not one of those people to be like, all right, and then like when you date someone for 3 months and they're this person, and then as soon as it gets past the honeymoon stage, they turn into someone completely different. I'm like, come on, guys.
Yeah.
I'm just the same. I'm just exactly how I am now is how I'm off this and how I am on it. And I guess it's just going to stay like that. I can't be any different.
Yeah. No, and that's good. And yeah, going from here, I want to, just what do you have for the future? I know you always ask your guests this, actually. I'm going to ask you those two questions.
You want to have on the show?
I'm going to ask you that before this wraps up. But so what do you want to, in a year's, because you said a couple of things and you probably thought like, oh, this might take longer. And then I had to remind you, I was like, you've already done this and stuff. And it's great to have goals, but it's also good to be like realistic and stuff. And the weird thing is, which I never got, was I always ask about, which you probably shouldn't pay too much attention to, but the data and stuff. And I didn't realize you only see Spotify downloads. So when someone downloads it, you can see that. But I don't download it. If I listen to it, I don't download it. Yeah. So it's so funny it's like, well, I don't know how many people listen to this, so why should I keep going? And 20 people downloaded it, but you don't know if 1,000 of people listen to it without downloading it. And so that would play with me as well. But yeah, I think it's also good you don't pay like too much attention to that or let that direct you into, okay, I've got to do this because of this. It's like, no, I'm just having fun. I've heard the people you want to get on, and it's like, it's great. It's still the same group of people. This person does that. It's like a local person. It's not like, oh, this person's got like heaps of clout or whatever and stuff, you know. Yeah. It's just like, this person's on, and now this person's on, and then like, oh, that person's like gets a bit of attention, but you know.
Well, and that was the thing, and that is always going to be the thing. And when I started this, like as you know, like I don't care if you have 1 million followers or you had 2 followers. If I believe in what you're doing and I think it's great, then I want to have you on because I believe in it, and it's not what anyone else thinks. Like I don't give a fuck who like, and this is the selfish part that I'm talking about. It's like no one else can tell me I can't have someone on here because it's my project.
Yeah.
So if I want to go talk to someone who's just started their project, which I have before, and I have had people come on that don't have like a massive following, but I like Jess, who makes these pearl necklaces. Really lovely person. Doesn't have a massive Instagram, but she's out there grinding and like really working hard to do a creative business that she really enjoys. And I respect that, and I want to support that and help them out because long term, like moving forward, is if every single person that I've had on is eventually going to get noticed in some way or another. Because if this does, and when it does get massive, just like it's a thing for all of us. It's not just for me, because now all these amazing people that I've had on, people can then go back through the backlog and be like, oh my God, like look at this person. Oh, I found this person. And then all of a sudden, all these jobs just start like getting like, you know, with you and Mika, like did Mika contact you for that photo thing before this? Or what was go with that?
I sort of knew of her through Sophie.
So that wasn't because of this then? Because if that's
it was because I became I missed that one. I was meant to be there for that, and then I missed it. And then I was like, oh, sorry, blah, blah, blah. And then I met with her.
Yeah.
That's what happened. I met with her because I just wanted to catch up anyway. So we called up because like, oh, we didn't do that. And we had to chat about something else, which then led into something. And shout out to her because she was like, I've got this. I watched her come up with the idea as we spoke. And she's like, oh, we should do this. And sometimes, oh, yeah. 6 weeks later, she's doing it. And she's like, we're at this exhibition. I'm like, yeah, you really got this going. Hey, like she got that done probably as soon as you could have got that done.
Yeah, she's so good.
That particular thing. And I was like, I've got so much respect for you. She's just one of the people, she's doing it. I don't care. I'm doing it. This is when it is. I don't necessarily care about the attention or who's, so I won't go too far down there, but shout out to
But yeah, well, even like someone, so Tyler Dunbar, always muck his last name up.
Yeah.
Love you, Tyler. When he was like the third guest on, or like he was like one of the first people ever come on here. And then Jesse, who runs Kid Veen, him and Tyler collaborated through this podcast.
Yeah.
Because of this podcast. So like, oh, you do this and I do that and I like your stuff. So then they started working together.
Yeah.
Literally because of this. And that was like, so like you said, sometimes I think I forget like all the things that I wanted this to be has already started happening, and I'm like, I just get caught off in my own little world. But
you're probably actually growing outside of this really confusing data that's like actually hard to read because you can't gauge like proper views and all that stuff. Like we're sitting in the like TTK like space. Because how many episodes ago was that? Like, really think about that.
Yeah.
10?
Yeah. I'm like 30-something episodes now.
Exactly. You've only done 30, and that short amount ago, you met them, and now you're here because they were, like, nice enough to provide and give these opportunities. So it's like, that's hilarious in my opinion. Like, that's, like, so quick. That's what I'm saying. That's actually crazy. Like most of the time people say that and like, yeah, and then like 2 years later you sort of like something happens. And it's like, no, now like.
Yeah, like also shout out to those girls. Like honestly, like this, I feel like this is kind of like a little bit of a highlight reel. It's fun.
Just shouting out everyone that's been on.
Yeah, and to be honest, I do want to shout out every single guest that has, because like I said at the start, like every single person in life, whoever gives me their time and actually like makes me a better person is. Like, I can't thank them enough because you're sharing an experience with someone and you're speaking to them. They're giving you their personality, they're giving you their time and all this stuff. And every single person I've ever asked to come on has said yes.
Yep.
No one has ever said no. And I'm so incredibly grateful for how easy it has been to have people come on, because people will think, I'm like so grateful that someone would want to come on and honoured that they would love to come on and talk, where then I've had them turn around and be like, no, it's like great that you're having us on. But I'm like, no. I'm like, for me, I'm like genuine. I'm like, I just want you to come on. Like, I'm grateful that you are giving me your time. So when external things happen, like the merch and stuff with the girls, or like them letting me use this beautiful space, and how easy, like how quick that happened. Like, remember when you were there for that episode?
Yeah,
and then
I think that was the first one I came to.
Yeah, and we're sitting there, and I was like, oh, look, I'm looking to get a studio eventually. Like, I don't know, like I would like to have a studio, and I kind of want to get merch. The next day, like the next morning at like 7 o'clock, Mum and Elle's on there going, oi, just like rambling off all this stuff, and I was like, oh my God. I was like freaking out. I was like, this is so great. Like, but yeah.
Yeah.
Big.
I remember you messaged me. You're like, I think they're going to let me use it like a space there. I was like, that's a pretty good get. Like, I was like, that's crazy. Like, we're just like talking words, we're just like, oh, this would be great. And they're like, oh, we could arrange that.
Just
and
spitballing ideas.
Yeah, it's like, oh, that's pretty convenient that you were here for that.
It's only been going for like 8 months.
Yeah.
9 months. Yeah, 9 months, I think. So come December, it'll be 1 year.
Yeah.
So in a year.
That's when you dropped the first one.
Yeah, I dropped it in December.
Yeah.
So that's crazy. Like, to think that, because I was on track to have like 50 episodes out this year.
Yeah.
Because I was doing one a week. But then I thought it'd be better to have like one a fortnight to build up the following guest and things like that.
Yeah, and life happens and all that sort of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess I'm it's glad to see you. Like, you had me on. Like people don't, you know what I mean? Like I'm nothing substantial. Like I think I've got like 300 followers on Instagram or something. But the fact that you're not trying to like build this like building with just like popularity and clout and coolness and this is that, and then that only leads to one thing when you go like cooler, better, well, you know, and then that you're at the stage where it's like, okay, I've only got like Kim Kardashian, Joe Rogan, and Russell Brand left because it's like, you know,
you got no more, nowhere to go.
Yeah. So it's cool that you're just like, I'm going to have whoever on. I've got this person at the start of the journey. That's great. Like they don't have to be like, oh, I'm this successful. Well, they're like, oh, no, I started like 3 months ago. Who cares? Like they've got this great story.
Yeah.
And the person that's starting 1 month gets the view of the person 2 months ahead of them and be like, oh, that's where you can get. Like you get every part of the book then that way.
Well, that's like, yeah, with this, it's like this, there's so many different elements to this whole project, but like one of the other elements is that people get to watch this grow into something big.
Yep.
And then they can go, oh, sweet, if he can do it, he's a numpty, then I can bloody do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like, because it's just consistency and staying the same. And that's like one big thing. And then the other big thing is that the reason why I want this to be so big, like worldwide, is because imagine if I had someone like who I truly believed in, who only had 100 followers, and this, let's say this hypothetically had like millions of subscribers. It was massive, like Joe Rogan style.
Yeah.
I could literally bring someone on who I believe in with no one even knows who they are. And the next minute, the next fucking, like their life has completely changed because I've got this sick ass platform to like let people like grow and be themselves. And that's what I want. I just want to help everyone in the world.
It's a nice gift to give.
Yeah, it's not, and it's not like a oh yeah, look at me. Like, you know, when people take videos of them helping people on the street, shit, trying to get like that own self validation. It's not. I'm not saying that for that reason. I'm just saying I genuinely like it'd be fucking cool to be like if Joe Rogan he has the power to do that. Like he could easily just be like, I'll just get someone on, and then next minute they could be the next biggest thing. You know what I mean? But I want to be the person that has that because no one else is doing it. I'm like, well, fucking, it'd be sick to just give someone that potential to do well. And it's like,
it's funny when you hear him have someone on and it's like their first ever podcast and they're not like, by the time you catch them, because sometimes I'll look them up to be like, oh, how like popular are they right now? But by the time I catch on, like you can't see what they were at 2 days before. And sometimes he'll say like, oh, blah, blah, and he's like, just wait. Like, he's like, wait till you get off here sort of thing. Like, you know, it's going to change. And it's like, man, it must be an impact of like.
Oh, it's huge.
Yeah. And there was like another podcast, 2 other podcasters that went on there and he's like, oh, you got to get it all. You'll get hate mail after the, like, you know, all this.
Everything.
Yeah. And he's like, just get ready for it. And it's like, man, it must be a big impact for people to go on there and then like the amount of people that would Google that person after that. But, we'll wrap it up now because we should probably head off. So there's 2 things I like to ask at the end of every podcast. And we do it with all the guests here at Creative Appetite. And
you've been waiting for this moment, haven't you? Like, this is actually the real reason why you want to do this podcast. So for this one moment.
I only thought of it 20 minutes ago. I was like, and I was like, I've got to remember what you say.
The floor is yours, baby. Go for gold.
So one thing is you get to shout out a local legend. And then the other thing is you get to give advice to someone that's maybe in a low. I love whenever you say this and some people just like
start shouting out like their mum and stuff.
Yeah, they call out like their brother and it's like, no, don't do that. And they're like, yeah, my brother's pretty lazy. Like, and it's like, no, that's not what this is. Like, how people take that sometimes and they just call out lazy people and it's like, oh no.
That's why I was like, maybe I'm just wording this not the right way. I was like, I don't know. But
no, I've definitely heard there was one and it was so funny and it was someone's brother or sister and I was just like listening to it, crack it up and then you're like, no, like just like give advice and you're, but to my brother, it's like, no. Or something like that.
I can't remember what episode that was, but I do remember, yeah.
Yeah, and it was just funny, and I was like, oh, that's great. But yeah, for real, well, I'll customize it. Who would you, so they can't be anyone you've asked, you got to be honest. So and local, let's keep it local. Like, let's be realistic. Within a year, let's say, by next Christmas, if you could get someone ideally on that's realistic on this podcast, who would you ideally like? Oh, I genuinely want to chat to that person, have them sitting here.
I haven't asked them to come on. Like, I have emailed them, but they never got back to me.
Okay.
But someone that I would like to have on the podcast to have a chat, because I think they've just got a lot. Like, they've got a lot to say, and they seem to be very knowledgeable across a lot of different fields, and it'd just be interesting to hear their different opinions on things. Is the husband and wife from 1924?
Oh,
Christian is his name. Is it Christian?
I think it is. Kyle is quite familiar with those people.
Yeah. I think he's very active on his social media about like a lot of different topics, and some of his opinions I don't agree with at all. But I'd just like to pick his brain about how he thinks of how he thinks about all these things. I think that would be a cool episode to have on.
They were massive on, was it Tumblr or Pinterest? Cole told me once, he was like, they were like, when that was hammering, they were like...
Yeah, probably, I'd say it'd be one of those. I don't know. I think it's Tumblr. Yeah.
He said like the Tumblr days. And their shop's amazing because I pick up some film from there for the lab. There's a drop-off box and I've been in there, and it's insane.
Yeah, I'd like to have him come on. That'd be cool.
Yep.
And there's also another person... I don't know the name, but she's like a YouTube cook, and she goes around like cooks, like makes YouTube videos of like cooking videos, like kind of like a cooking show. Yeah, I'd like to have her come on. I know Perry knows her.
Yep.
So
What's her name?
I don't remember.
Yeah.
So
she local?
Yeah. She's got a massive following, but it'd just be cool to like speak to someone who literally works in front of a camera 24/7. Yeah. To like talk about like the psychology behind that and how you feel as a person constantly being surrounded by cameras, and it'd just be cool to have a chat.
Is that what they do primarily? Is that all they do?
She just makes YouTube videos, cooking videos.
Yeah, right. It's not Belinda.
Maybe. I actually have no idea what her name is. Perry did tell me once, and then it's been a long time. Yep. Between drinks. Yeah.
And the second one, advice.
Yeah. Shout out to my brother. You're lazy. The advice I'd like to give is be true to yourself. Don't. If you truly believe in what you are setting out to achieve, try just like set small goals, be realistic with yourself, stay consistent. And if the project doesn't go the way you want it and it does come to an end, don't beat yourself up over it, because who you are as a person and the drive that you have, that project obviously wasn't meant to be. So as long as you still maintain drive, and you're motivated and you're polite and you are just a genuine person and you stick to your guns, everything will fall into place.
Stick to the guns. That's a good one.
Stick to your guns.
Stick to the guns.
Yeah. Don't let anyone just say you can't do something, because you can.
Yep. Yeah, that's great. And I'll say, and this isn't you asking, someone sponsored this thing. I want get some Land and Sea or a coffee or something.
Land and Sea, ginger beer, come on, coffee.
Just a 4-pack every podcast.
Mercedes, I need a van. I'm actually moving into a van soon, so if you want to sponsor the podcast,
someone local. There'd be someone wants that little shout out, and that's coming from me, not Jesse. Come on, just chip in, guys. It's not much.
We believe in the project.
There's plenty of coffee roasters.
You can wrap this up.
Yeah, right.
This is your floor.
Well, you just sort of go, you.
Yeah, but you just, you
I probably don't. I do a lot more than that.
Tell your grandma about it. Like, subscribe, share.
I've never said that. I don't know if I can say it. Like, subscribe. Get on, follow everyone involved tonight. It's great. Jesse.
Messy with Jesse.
Messy with Jesse. And, Creative Appetite. Get onto it. You.